In the gleaming towers of Manhattan, a 62-year-old janitor in a worn gray uniform was moments away from facing the most brutal corporate humiliation of his life. What started as a weekend team-building exercise quickly turned into chaos when Darren Klein, the ambitious marketing director, made his move to establish dominance. But Elliot Graves wasn't just a maintenance worker. For 10 years, he had operated as the vanished billionaire founder of Nexus Industries, responsible for building a corporate empire from nothing. When Klein attempted to publicly humiliate him on camera, he didn't realize he was triggering a reaction from someone trained to dismantle entire power structures with surgical precision. Graves launched a strategic revelation that unleashed consequences far beyond what anyone expected. What began as casual workplace cruelty transformed into the most spectacular corporate reckoning in Manhattan history. After that day, Nexus Industries would never forget the name Graves. Before the truth unravel, drop your city in the comments and stay with us. This story isn't just about a janitor, it's about every time we judge too quickly. And trust me, what happens next, you won't forget it. So hit subscribe. Tomorrow's story might be yours. The gleaming towers of Nexus Industries pierced the Manhattan skyline like digital daggers, their glass facades reflecting the ambition that pulsed through every floor. On the 42nd level, confusion rippled through the open-plan office, as employees clustered around printed memos, their voices a symphony of bewilderment and complaint. Team-building weekend, read Marcus from accounting, his designer glasses sliding down his nose. What kind of team building involves cleaning? Kind that makes no sense, muttered Sarah from marketing, her manicured nails tapping against her iPhone screen. I have a yoga retreat in the Hamptons this weekend. This is insane. The memo was simple, almost insulting in its brevity. All staff required to participate in empathy-building exercise. Dress code? Casual. Cleaning supplies provided. Mandatory. Attendance. Elliot Graves moved through the chaos like a ghost in maintenance coveralls, his weathered hands pushing a utility cart loaded with mops, buckets, and industrial-grade cleaning solution. At 63, he possessed the kind of invisible presence that came from decades of being overlooked, shoulders slightly hunched, graying hair thinning at the crown, eyes that seemed to absorb everything while revealing nothing. He'd been the janitor here for 3 months. Nobody knew his last name. Nobody asked. This is absolutely ridiculous. Darren Klein's voice cut through the murmur like a blade. At 29, he was all sharp angles and aggressive cologne. His designer jeans, an untucked Oxford shirt, a calculated display of casual authority. The interim manager position he'd landed through his father's connections sat on his shoulders like armor, and he wore it with the desperation of someone who knew it didn't quite fit. I mean, seriously, Darren continued, his voice rising too. Ensure maximum audience. What's next? Are we going to shadow the security guards? Follow the janitor around and learn the dignity of honest work? He gestured dismissively toward Elliot, who continued organizing his supplies with methodical precision. A few employees chuckled nervously. Others pulled out their phones, sensing content in the making. Natalie Cho, a junior analyst with kind eyes and an oversized cardigan, shifted uncomfortably at her desk. She'd been at Nexus for 6 months. Long enough to recognize the company's cultural landmines, but not long enough to navigate them with confidence. Something about the way Darren's words landed made her stomach turn. You know what? Darren announced, his voice gaining momentum. Maybe this is perfect. Maybe we can all learn something from our resident expert. He strode toward Elliot with the swagger of a man who'd never been truly challenged. Hey, Janitor! Elliot straightened slowly, his hands stilling on the cart handle. When he turned, his eyes met Darren's with a steadiness that should have been a warning. You've been doing this for what, years? Darren's smile was all teeth and no warmth. Decades, probably. So tell us, what's the secret to finding fulfillment in this? He gestured broadly at the cleaning supplies, his voice dripping with mock reverence. The office had gone quiet. Phones were raised. Someone whispered about going viral. Elliot's response was measured, his voice carrying the gravelly texture of someone who chose his words carefully. I find that most work has dignity, sir. It's the people who sometimes lack it. The words hung in the air like a challenge wrapped in silk. Darren's smile faltered for just a moment before returning twice as bright. Oh, that's rich. He laughed, turning to his audience. Philosophy from the Mop Brigade. Let me guess, you're going to tell us that cleaning toilets is just as important as running a company. Different importance, Elliot said simply, but importance nonetheless. Darren's laugh was sharp, brittle. You know what? You're right. Let me show everyone just how important this work is. He grabbed his coffee mug, still half full of expensive Ethiopian blend, and walked to the center of the office. Then, with theatrical deliberation, he turned it upside down. The coffee splashed across the polished concrete floor in a dark spreading stain. Gasps and nervous laughter rippled through the crowd. Oops, Darren said, not sounding sorry at all. Looks like someone's got some important work to do. The silence that followed was deafening. Elliot looked at the spilled coffee, then at Darren, then at the faces surrounding them, some amused, some uncomfortable, all watching. He nodded once, as if accepting an inevitable truth about human nature. Without a word, he reached for his mop. As he worked, his movements were economical, practiced. He didn't hurry, didn't show anger, didn't give them the reaction they expected. He simply cleaned, as if the humiliation was just another spill, another mess to be managed. But Natalie noticed something the others missed. When Elliot bent to clean the coffee, she caught a glimpse of his watch, a Patek Philippe that costs more than her annual salary. And when he straightened, adjusting his grip on the mop handle, she saw calluses on his palms that spoke of labor. Yes, but also the faint tan line of a wedding ring that was no longer there. "There we go," Darren announced as Elliot finished. "Now that's what I call leadership, leading by example." More laughter, more phone cameras capturing the moment. Elliot returned to his cart, his expression unchanged. But as he passed Natalie's desk, she heard him murmur something so quietly she almost missed it. Character reveals itself in moments like these. She wasn't sure if he was talking about Darren or himself. Mr. Bennett, the HR director, had watched the entire exchange from his office doorway, tall and silver-haired, with a kind of stillness that suggested deep waters. He made a single note on his tablet before retreating into his office. The crowd began to disperse. The show over, Darren basked in the attention, already planning his next performance. The weekend stretched ahead, full of possibilities for asserting dominance. But Natalie lingered, watching Elliot return to his work with the same quiet dignity he'd shown moments before. Something about the way he'd handled Darren's cruelty nagged at her, not the humiliation itself, but the way he'd absorbed it, as if he'd been testing them rather than being tested. She thought about his words, about character revealing itself, and realized she was about to spend the weekend learning exactly what that meant. The office building after hours possessed an entirely different personality. Gone was the frenetic energy of ambition and caffeine. In its place settled a cathedral quiet, broken only by the hum of servers and the whisper of climate control. Emergency lighting cast long shadows across the empty workstations, transforming the familiar landscape into something almost mystical. Natalie had volunteered to stay late, ostensibly to catch up on quarterly reports, but really because she couldn't shake the image of Elliot methodically cleaning up Darren's deliberate mess. She'd watched him work throughout the day, noting the way he moved through the office with an almost proprietary knowledge of its systems and spaces. Now, as she gathered her things to leave, she heard something that made her pause. The soft beep of electronic locks disengaging, followed by the quiet hum of machinery coming online. The sounds were coming from the server room, a restricted area that required executive-level access codes. Curiosity overrode caution. She slipped off her heels and padded silently across the polished floor, following the sounds to the server room's reinforced glass door. Through the tinted window, she could see him. Elliot stood before the main server bank, his maintenance coveralls replaced by dark slacks and a simple button-down shirt. His fingers moved across the keyboard with the fluid precision of someone who'd written the code himself, navigating diagnostic screens that would have baffled most of the company's IT staff. The central server had been experiencing intermittent failures for weeks, causing system-wide slowdowns that had IT scrambling for solutions. As Natalie watched, Elliot pulled up architectural diagrams she'd never seen before, ISTM blueprints that seemed to map not just the current network, but iterations of infrastructure that went back years. His hands moved with absolute confidence, entering override codes from memory, bypassing security protocols with the casual ease of someone who'd built them. Within minutes, the server's error lights shifted from angry red to steady green. "Interesting," he murmured to himself, his voice carrying in the quiet room, still using the old authentication hierarchy. "I should have updated that years ago." The words hit Natalie like a physical blow. Should have updated that years ago. She pressed herself against the wall, heart hammering, as the implications crashed over her. The man everyone dismissed as just the janitor had just performed advanced system administration that would have taken their entire IT department days to accomplish. He'd used override codes that, according to company policy, only existed in the founder's original documentation. The founder who'd vanished from public life a decade ago after some personal tragedy, the reclusive genius who'd built Nexus Industries from a garage startup into a tech empire, then disappeared into legend. Elliot Graves wasn't just the janitor, he was the Elliot Graves. Through the glass, she watched him run final diagnostics, his expression focused but relaxed. This wasn't the nervous concentration of someone working beyond their expertise. This was the casual competence of someone coming home. The next morning brought mandatory team-building activities that felt more like corporate theater than genuine connection. Darren had appointed himself director of the show, organizing elaborate icebreaker games and trust exercises that had everyone rolling their eyes. "Okay, people," he announced, clipboard in hand like a camp counselor, "we're going to do something called Appreciation Circle. Everyone gets to share one thing they appreciate about their coworkers." Groans rippled through the assembled staff. Someone muttered about resume updates. Elliot sat apart from the main group, quietly eating a sandwich and reading what looked like a technical manual. His presence was easy to overlook. He'd perfected the art of being invisible in plain sight. "You know," Darren said, his voice carrying that particular tone that meant trouble was coming, "I think we should include everyone in this exercise. After all, we're all part of the Nexus family, right?" His gaze fixed on Elliot with predatory focus. "Even our support staff." Natalie felt her stomach drop. After last night's revelation, watching Darren target Elliot felt like watching someone poke a sleeping dragon. "Come on, Janitor," Darren called out, his voice bright with false cheer. "Join our circle. Share some wisdom about teamwork." Elliot looked up from his manual, his expression unreadable. For a moment, Natalie thought he might refuse. Then he closed the book. She caught a glimpse of the title, Advanced Network Security Protocols, 3rd edition, and stood. "I appreciate," he said quietly, his voice carrying despite its softness, "the opportunity to observe how people treat each other when they think it doesn't matter." The words landed like stones in still water, sending ripples of discomfort through the group. Darren's smile flickered. "That's philosophical," he said, scrambling to regain control. "But maybe we could have something more concrete, like I don't no appreciation for the people who actually drive the company forward." "Oh, I appreciate them very much," Elliot replied, his tone unchanged. "I'm just still figuring out who they are." Before Darren could respond, the building's main elevator shuddered to a halt with a mechanical groan. The display showed it was stuck between floors 38 and 39, with several employees trapped inside. "Great," someone muttered. "Security's going to have to call maintenance. And it's Saturday, we'll be here all day." "I've got this," Elliot said, already moving toward the elevator bank. "What are you going to do?" Darren called after him. "Polish the buttons until they work." Elliot didn't respond. He opened the maintenance panel beside the elevator with a key from his belt, revealing a complex array of switches and diagnostic displays. His fingers moved across the controls with the same confidence Natalie had witnessed in the server room. "Emergency protocols," he murmured, more to himself than anyone else. "Override the safety interlock, reroute power through the backup systems." The elevator whined back to life, smoothly completing its journey to the ground floor. The trapped employees emerged, looking relieved and slightly confused. "How did you?" one of them started. "Just maintenance," Elliot said, closing the panel. "Sometimes the old systems need someone who understands their original design." As he walked away, Natalie noticed Mr. Bennett watching from the corner of the room, his expression thoughtful. Their eyes met for a moment, and she saw something there, not surprise, but recognition. He knew. Mr. Bennett knew exactly who Elliot was. That evening, alone in her apartment, Natalie sat before her laptop with the intensity of a detective solving a cold case. She'd spent hours searching through archived news articles, corporate filings, and business journals, following a trail of breadcrumbs that led to a story she'd never heard in full. Elliot Graves, founder and CEO of Nexus Industries. Brilliant, reclusive, revolutionary, he'd built the company from nothing, turning a simple idea about intuitive user interfaces into a tech empire worth billions. Then, 10 years ago, he'd vanished. The official story was simple. He'd stepped down to pursue personal interests, handing control to a board of directors while maintaining a majority stake. But the real story, buried in society pages and gossip columns, was darker. His wife Elena had died in a car accident. Their daughter, Sarah, had been killed in the same crash. The man who'd built his fortune on connection and communication had lost the only connections that mattered. The last verified photo of Elliot Graves showed him at their funeral, standing alone beside two graves, his face a mask of grief that seemed to age him decades in a single moment. After that, nothing. He disappeared into a privacy so complete it seemed almost supernatural. The company continued to thrive under professional management, but its founder had become a ghost story, a legend whispered about in boardrooms and business schools. Until now, Natalie stared at the screen, at the archived photo of a younger Elliot Graves cutting the ribbon at Nexus Industries' grand opening. Even accounting for the years and the grief, the resemblance was unmistakable. The same steady eyes, the same careful way of holding himself, the same suggestion of depths that ran far deeper than the surface. She thought about Darren's cruelty, about the way he'd humiliated a man who could buy and sell him 1,000 times over, about the way Elliot had absorbed it all with the patience of someone who'd learned that true power didn't need to announce itself. Her phone buzzed with a text from her sister. "How's the corporate retreat from hell going?" Natalie stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back, "I think I'm about to witness the greatest comeback in corporate history." Monday morning arrived with the weight of revelation hanging over Natalie like a storm cloud. She'd barely slept, her mind racing through the implications of what she'd discovered. Every interaction with Elliot over the past 3 months took on new meaning. His quiet observations, his unexpected insights, the way he seemed to understand the company's operations better than people who'd worked there for years. She arrived early, hoping to catch him before the day's activities began. She found him in the break room, methodically cleaning coffee makers with the same attention to detail he brought to everything else. The sight of him performing menial tasks while potentially being worth billions made her chest tight with something between admiration and heartbreak. Mr. Graves? The name slipped out before she could stop herself. He looked up, his expression carefully neutral. I'm sorry. I know who you are. The words tumbled out in a rush. I saw you in the server room. I did research. I know about Alina and Sarah. I know you built this place. For a moment, something flickered across his face, pain, recognition, maybe relief. Then the mask settled back into place. I think you have me confused with someone else, he said quietly. I'm just the janitor. No, Natalie stepped closer, her voice urgent. You're not. And what Darren's been doing to you, not right. It's not right even if you were just the janitor. But knowing who you really are, who I really am, Elliot interrupted, his voice still soft but carrying new weight, is someone who's been watching his company forget what it was supposed to stand for. Someone who needed to understand how far we'd fallen. The admission hung between them like a confession. You're testing us, Natalie said, understanding flooding through her. This whole weekend, Darren's behavior, you're seeing who we really are when we think it doesn't matter. Character reveals itself in moments like these, he said, echoing his words from the day before. I needed to know if Nexus Industries was worth saving, or if I'd built something that had lost its soul. And what have you learned? His smile was sad but genuine, that there are still good people here. People who treat others with dignity regardless of their position. People who stand up for what's right, even when it's uncomfortable. Before Natalie could respond, Darren's voice boomed across the office. Attention everyone. Time for our closing ceremony. Everyone to the main conference room for the presentation of our Weekend Achievement Awards. Elliot's expression shifted to something Natalie couldn't quite read. It's time, he said simply. The main conference room buzzed with the restless energy of people eager to finish their mandatory participation and return to their real lives. Darren had set up a makeshift stage at the front, complete with a PowerPoint presentation and what looked like certificates printed on his home printer. Welcome to our achievement recognition ceremony, he announced, his voice carrying the forced enthusiasm of a game show host. This weekend has been about learning, growing, and appreciating the contributions of every member of our Nexus family. He launched into a speech about teamwork and mutual respect that would have been inspiring if it weren't coming from someone who'd spent the weekend doing exactly the opposite. Natalie watched from the back of the room, her anxiety building with each passing minute. And now, Darren continued, I want to bring up someone who's been a real inspiration to all of us. Someone who's shown us the value of hard work, and what's the word? Humility. Our very own janitor. The room erupted in scattered applause and barely suppressed laughter. Phones came out, ready to capture whatever humiliation Darren had planned. Elliot stood slowly, his movements deliberate and calm. As he walked to the front of the room, Natalie noticed something had changed. His posture was straighter, his presence more commanding. The invisible man was becoming visible. Speech, speech, someone called out, and others took up the chant. Darren handed him the microphone with a smile that was all malice and triumph. Tell us, janitor, what have you learned about leadership this weekend? Elliot took the microphone, his fingers sure and steady. When he spoke, his voice carried a quiet authority that seemed to transform the room's acoustics. I've learned, he began, that true leadership isn't about the title on your business card or the size of your office. It's about how you treat people when you think no one important is watching. The room had gone quiet, sensing a shift in the emotional weather. I've learned that some people believe humility is weakness, when in fact it's the strongest foundation for real power. And I've learned that real character reveals itself, not in moments of triumph, but in moments of testing. Darren's smile was beginning to crack around the edges. That's very philosophical, he said, reaching for the microphone. But maybe we should. I'm not finished. The words weren't loud, but they carried absolute authority. Darren's hand froze in mid. You see, Elliot continued, his eyes sweeping the room, this weekend has been a test. Not of your cleaning skills or your ability to follow orders, but of your character, your humanity, your capacity to treat others with dignity regardless of their perceived status. The room was dead silent now, everyone sensing that something significant was happening. Some of you passed that test, some of you failed spectacularly. His gaze found Darren and held it, and one of you seems to have forgotten that true leadership serves from the bottom up, not the top down. Look, Darren said, his voice higher. Now, nervous laughter creeping in. I think we're getting a little too deep into the philosophy here. Maybe we should just let's stop pretending. The voice came from the back of the room. Mr. Bennett stepped forward, his expression grave and formal. Ladies and gentlemen, I think it's time for proper introductions. The silence that followed was deafening. The man you've been calling the janitor is Elliot Graves. He founded this company 25 years ago. He built it from nothing into what it is today. He's been living among you for 3 months, not as a joke or a publicity stunt, but because he needed to understand what his company had become. Gasps and whispers rippled through the room like a wave. Phones were lowered, forgotten. Darren's face went through a spectrum of emotions: confusion, disbelief, recognition, and finally, absolute horror. Mr. Graves, Bennett continued, still owns 67% of Nexus Industries. Every paycheck you've ever received here has, ultimately, come from him, and he's been watching. Elliot returned the microphone to its stand, his movements unhurried despite the chaos erupting around him. When he spoke again, his voice was quieter, but it carried to every corner of the room. I didn't come back to play games, or to humiliate anyone. I came back because I needed to know if the company I built, the company my wife and daughter believed in, was worth saving. I needed to understand who we'd become. His eyes found Natalie in the crowd, and she saw something there that might have been gratitude. I learned that we have people here who lead with their hearts, who treat others with dignity regardless of their position, who stand up for what's right even when it's difficult. And I learned that we have people who've forgotten that every person in this company, from the newest intern to the most senior executive, deserves respect. The room was so quiet that the building's mechanical systems seemed thunderous. There will be changes, Elliot said simply, but not punishments, not revenge, just realignment. A return to the values that built this place. He looked at Darren, who stood frozen in place, his face pale and his hands trembling slightly. Mr. Klein, Elliot said, his voice not unkind, we need to talk. The executive conference room had been transformed overnight. Gone were the motivational posters and corporate buzzwords that had decorated the walls for the past 3 months of Elliot's observation. In their place hung the original artwork, from Nexus Industries' founding, simple, elegant pieces that spoke of innovation tempered with humanity. Elliot sat at the head of the mahogany table, no longer in maintenance coveralls, but in a perfectly tailored navy suit that somehow made him look both more approachable and more formidable. The transformation was remarkable not just in appearance, but in presence. The invisible man had become undeniably visible, one by one. Employees filed in for what the company-wide email had simply called realignment conversations. The tone was formal but not threatening, professional but not cold. It was, Natalie realized, exactly what she would have expected from someone who'd built a company culture around respect and innovation. Darren was the first to be called in, his usual swagger replaced by the careful movements of someone walking through a minefield. He'd spent the night alternating between panic and desperate strategizing, trying to figure out how to salvage a career that seemed to be crumbling in recent time. Mr. Klein, Elliot said as Darren took the seat across from him, please, sit. The silence stretched between them for a moment, heavy with implications. Darren opened his mouth several times, false starts at explanations or apologies, but no words came. You're wondering if you're fired, Elliot said finally, his voice carrying the same quiet authority it had held during his revelation. That's a fair question, Mr. Graves. Darren began, but Elliot held up a hand. Let me ask you something first. This weekend, when you were interacting with me, what did you think you were accomplishing? Darren's face flushed red. I thought I was showing leadership, taking charge of the situation, by humiliating someone you perceived as powerless. The question hung in the air like a judgment. Darren's shoulders sagged. I don't know, he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. I guess I thought it would make me look strong. And what do you think now? Darren was quiet for a long moment, his hands clenched in his lap. When he spoke, his voice was thick with something that might have been genuine remorse. I think it made me look like exactly the kind of person I never wanted to be. Elliot leaned back in his chair, studying the younger man with the intensity of someone making a crucial decision. You're not fired, Mr. Klein, he said finally. But you're not staying in management either. You're going to start over, from the ground up. Mailroom, filing, basic administrative work. You'll learn every job in this company, understand every person's contribution, and maybe you'll learn what leadership actually means. Darren's relief was palpable, but it was mixed with something else, uncertainty, maybe even fear. Why? He asked. Why give me a second chance? Because, Elliot said, I believe in redemption. I believe people can change, can grow, can become better than they were. But that belief comes with conditions. You'll check in with me personally. Every week you'll participate in mentorship programs. And if you ever treat another human being the way you treated me this weekend, you'll be gone that same day. Darren nodded rapidly, tears starting to form in his eyes. Yes, sir. Thank you. Sir, I won't let you down. You won't let yourself down, Elliot corrected. This is about who you choose to be, not who you think I want you to be. As Darren left, Elliot made notes on a leather portfolio, his handwriting neat and precise. The morning continued with a steady stream of conversation, some difficult, some inspiring, all carefully tailored to the individual sitting across from him. The office, gossips found themselves assigned to customer service, where they'd learn the value of every communication. The brown-nosers were moved to quality control, where results mattered more than appearances. The genuine leaders, people like Natalie, found themselves with new opportunities, new responsibilities, new chances to grow. When Natalie's turn came, she approached the conference room with a mixture of anticipation and nervousness. The past few days had been a whirlwind of revelation and change, and she wasn't sure what to expect. Please, sit, Elliot said, gesturing to the chair across from him. His smile was warm, genuine, carrying none of the careful neutrality he'd shown with others. "I want to thank you," he said without preamble. "This weekend, when things got difficult, you chose kindness over conformity. You chose to see me as a person rather than a position. That matters more than you know." It didn't feel right," Natalie said, surprised by her own honesty. "The way Darren was treating you, the way everyone was laughing, it felt wrong." "It was wrong," Elliot agreed. "But recognizing that, and acting on that recognition, takes courage. It takes character. And that's exactly what this company needs more of." He slid a folder across the table to her. "I'm offering you a position as my executive assistant and strategic advisor. It's a big job, with significant responsibilities. You'll be involved in major decisions, you'll have access to confidential information, and you'll be helping to shape the culture of this company going forward." Natalie opened the folder, her eyes widening at the salary figure and benefits package. But more than the money, it was the opportunity that took her breath away. "Why me?" she asked. "I'm just a junior analyst. I don't have the experience for—" "Something like this experience can be taught," Elliot said. "Character cannot. You've shown me that you lead with your heart, that you treat people with dignity, that you stand up for what's right, even when it's difficult. Those are the qualifications that matter most." He leaned forward, his expression serious. "This company lost its way somewhere along the path to success. It forgot that business is fundamentally about people, serving them, respecting them, empowering them. I need people around me who understand that, who can help me rebuild that culture." "I accept," Natalie said, the words coming out in a rush. "I accept, and I promise I won't let you down." "You won't let yourself down," Elliot said, echoing his words to Darren. "And you won't let this company down. That's what matters." As the day wound down, Elliot found himself alone in the conference room, looking out at the Manhattan skyline through floor-to-ceiling windows. The city spread out below him like a circuit board, connections and pathways stretching in every direction. His phone buzzed with a text from Bennett. "All conversations complete. The changes are in motion. How do you feel about what we've accomplished?" Elliot typed back. "Like we've remembered who we were supposed to be all along." The next morning, the office had a different energy. Word had spread about the changes, about the reasons behind them, about the quiet revolution that had taken place over a single weekend. People moved with more purpose, spoke with more consideration, looked at each other with newfound respect. Darren arrived early, dressed in simple khakis and a button-down shirt instead of his usual designer ensemble. He made his way to the mailroom, with the careful steps of someone learning to walk again, carrying himself with a humility that seemed genuine rather than performed. Natalie sat at her new desk outside Elliot's office, a nameplate reading executive assistant to the CEO catching the morning light. She was reviewing reports, preparing briefings, already immersed in the work of helping to steer the company back to its founding principles. Throughout the office, other changes were evident. The quality control team was working with new energy, knowing their work mattered. Customer service was handling calls with renewed patience and care. The IT department was collaborating more effectively, understanding that every system they maintained touched real people's lives. At 10 o'clock, Elliot emerged from his office for the first time as the visible CEO of Nexus Industries. He walked through the office slowly, stopping to speak with employees, asking about their work, their challenges, their ideas for improvement. His presence was calm, authoritative, but never intimidating. As he passed the break room, he paused. On the bulletin board, someone had posted a simple sign: "Character reveals itself in moments like these." Below it, in smaller text, "Choose kindness, choose respect, choose to see the person, not the position." A small smile crossed his face. The message was spreading, taking root, becoming part of the culture he was rebuilding. "Mr. Graves," he turned, to find Bennett approaching, a tablet in his hands and a look of satisfaction on his face. "The quarterly reports are in. Employee satisfaction is up 17% from last quarter. Customer retention is at an all-time high, and we just landed the Harrison account. They said they were impressed by our company culture." "Culture," Elliot repeated, the word carrying weight. "Alina always said that culture was the most important product any company could create." "She was right," Bennett said simply. "And she'd be proud of what you've built here, what you've rebuilt." Elliot nodded, his eyes moving across the office, his company, his responsibility. Somewhere in the distance, he could hear Darren's voice as he helped train a new intern, his tone patient and encouraging. Near the windows, Natalie was presenting ideas to the marketing team, her confidence growing with each passing day. "You know what the hardest part of this whole experiment was?" he asked Bennett. "What?" "Not the humiliation, not the insults, not even watching people I employed treat me like I was invisible." He paused, his expression thoughtful. "It was remembering that I'd built something worth saving, that despite everything we'd lost sight of, the foundation was still solid. And now?" Elliot's smile was genuine, carrying a warmth that had been absent for too long. "Now we build on that foundation. We create something Alina and Sarah would be proud of, something that serves people instead of just profit, that values character over charisma, that remembers that true power comes from lifting others up." As the day continued, the office buzzed with renewed purpose. Phone calls were handled with greater care, emails were written with more consideration, meetings were conducted with deeper respect. The change wasn't dramatic. It was subtle, organic, real. In the mailroom, Darren sorted packages with the same meticulous attention he'd once brought to his management duties. Each label was checked twice, each delivery logged carefully. When a new employee asked him about the company culture, he paused in his work. "It's different here," he said, his voice carrying the weight of hard-learned wisdom. "The man who built this place, he understands that how you treat people when you think. It doesn't matter as exactly when it matters most." "Sounds like someone worth working for," the new employee said. "He is," Darren replied, returning to his work with something that looked remarkably like contentment. 3 months later, Elliot stood in what had once been an unused conference room, now transformed into a memorial garden with carefully tended plants and soft, natural light. 2 simple plaques hung on the wall: Elliot Graves, who believed in building bridges, and Sarah Graves, who reminded us that wonder exists everywhere. "The quarterly reports are remarkable," Natalie said, joining him in the quiet space. She carried herself with new confidence, having grown into her role as his executive advisor. Employee satisfaction, up 23%, customer retention at record highs. 3 major clients have specifically mentioned our company culture as a deciding factor. "Culture," Elliot repeated, his gaze moving from the memorial plaques to the thriving office beyond the glass walls. "Alina always said that culture was the most important product any company could create." Through the transparent walls, they could see the transformed workspace. Darren walked past, now a junior account coordinator, carrying reports with quiet competence. The swagger was gone, replaced by genuine leadership earned through service. He waved respectfully when he noticed them. "He's training another new hire," Natalie observed, "teaching them that everyone matters, regardless of position." "People can change," Elliot said, "when they're given the right environment and motivation. Sometimes our best leaders are those who've learned from their worst mistakes." Elliot turned to face the office he'd built, lost, and reclaimed. On his desk through the window sat a framed photo of Alina and Sarah, alongside a handwritten note from Miguel, the night janitor. "Thank you for showing us that every job has dignity." "I've made a decision," he said quietly. "Tomorrow we announce my return as visible CEO. No more hiding, no more anonymity. This company deserves a leader who stands in the light." Natalie smiled. "The culture is strong enough now. It can survive any scrutiny." "More than that," Elliot said, his voice carrying quiet determination. "I'm establishing a cultural constitution, permanent principles that ensure respect and dignity remain foundational, regardless of who leads this company in the future." As evening approached, the last employee to leave was Miguel, the current janitor. He knocked softly on Elliot's door. "Mr. Graves, my daughter works for another tech company. When I tell her about how people treat each other here, she says it gives her hope." Elliot looked up from his work. "Miguel, what would you do if you saw someone being disrespected because of their job?" Miguel didn't hesitate. "I'd speak up. You taught us that silence in the face of injustice is participation." "I didn't teach you that," Elliot said gently. "You already knew it. I just created an environment where you felt safe to act on it." After Miguel left, Elliot sat alone in his office, city lights twinkling beyond his windows. His computer chimed with an email from Natalie, cultural constitution framework attached. "I think Alina and Sarah would approve." He opened the document, reading principles that would protect future generations of employees. At the bottom, Natalie had added their shared motto: "Character reveals itself in moments like these. Choose wisely." Elliot leaned back, a sense of completion settling over him. The test was over. The company was saved. The culture was rebuilt. Tomorrow, he would step back into the public eye as the leader his company deserved. But tonight, he was content to sit in the quiet office he'd once cleaned, surrounded by evidence of a culture reborn. The invisible king had become visible again. More importantly, he'd ensured that in his kingdom, no one would ever truly be invisible again. Today we learn that power reveals who you are, but humility defines who you become. If that one hit home, give it a like. And if you want more stories that reveal the truth behind the mask, you know what to do. Subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one.